Democrats zeroing in on the Bidens, talking about the former vice president's son and his business dealings with Ukraine, anticipating it will be part of the White House defense. Also responding to Republicans who call their arguments in the impeachment trial repetitive. Let's bring in Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He joins us now. Senator, great to have you on this morning. Thank you for being here.
Good to be on with you, Sandra. Thanks for having me.
So first up, summarize the last couple of days. Have Democrats effectively made their case?
I think to the extent that we are doing so with a disability of having a lot of evidence withheld, I think the Democrats from the House did a very strong job of bringing the impeachment forward. I thought yesterday was a particularly strong day, taking the evidence that they had gathered and putting it into the narrative of the story, how the scheme was developed, how it unfolded, how the cover-up of it took place, and then going back again over that same evidence and showing how that story of the corrupt scheme fits into the constitutional predicates for impeachment. So they did a very thorough job, I think, of using the evidence to hammer the case into the shape that it needs to be to support a vote of guilty.
The White House will get to make their case tomorrow. How, Senator,
Correct.
will you be listening to that? There's been a lot of talk about the extent to which senators were paying attention to all of this when it was in the House and the multiple hearings that we all saw. So in what way will you be open to hearing the defense?
Well, look, I think we're all under an obligation to give both sides a fair listen. I think if the White House lawyers spend their time on a lot of personal ad hominem invective about the fraudulent nature of the House managers and so forth, we tend to tune that out. We've heard invective before. It's not very convincing. I think we'll be looking to see to what extent they actually try to respond to the House's case on the merits, rather than just having their argument be, you know, House bad, Democrats bad, grievance, grievance, grievance.
Well, I hear
therefore,
you repeating
nobody
words,
deserves
Senator,
a fair trial.
And a lot of the criticism of the Democrats' case has been repetition. You heard Go ahead.
Well, that's how you do a case. You tell the jury what the evidence is, and then you go back and you tell the evidence how it fits into, how it creates the offense, and then you say how that fits against the law. Mm-hmm. So a good prosecutor is using the same evidence multiple times in his opening, in the case in chief, and in the closing argument. So repetitive isn't really much of a sensible complaint. And to the extent that the complaint we've heard is that there's nothing new, that takes a certain amount of brass when the White House has dedicated itself to making sure that lots of new evidence that is available and out there that may even be in boxes can't be brought in.
And I don't mean to speak over you. So much I want to get to with you. But
go ahead.
When it comes to evidence, I'll talk to you about witnesses in just a moment. But there were some moderate Republicans with whom, of course, the Democrats would like to sway in all of this, particularly when it comes to calling witnesses, who took offense to some of the words, particularly when it came to the use of the words cover-up to describe if you did not vote in favor of hearing witnesses. Susan Collins said she was stunned at Jerry Nadler's diatribe this week when he deemed it a cover-up if she would not vote to have witnesses called. Lisa Murkowski said she was offended by it. As one who's listening attentively and working hard to get to a fair process, I was offended, she said. How did you respond to those moderate Republicans?
I thought that the first day was characterized by comments on both sides that I would not have used and that I did not think were helpful. I thought the first shot was fired when the White House lawyers used the word fraudulent, which is in many respects an accusation of criminal conduct about the House managers, and it went back and forth from there. But I do think that when the Chief Justice stepped in and admonished both sides equally to knock it off and remember where they were, that had a very good effect, and there has been, I think, no further problem in this impeachment. I don't know if you can call it a trial since we don't have any evidence or witnesses, but in this impeachment presentation,
the evidence,
we'll see
of course,
about
was
how
what was but this was voted on in the House. So when it comes to evidence, I know that Democrats want to hear from more witnesses. Obviously, John Bolton has been a target. Mick Mulvaney was brought up a lot yesterday. So what are you asking for, Senator?
Well, the ideal way and the fair way, consistent with probably 200 years of American jurisprudence, is to let the two parties, the House managers and the White House lawyers, decide who they want to call, and then subject to the presiding officers, the judge's ruling on whether their testimony is relevant, probative, prejudicial, etc., allow that evidence in. But because this is a little bit strange and we haven't been allowed to do that, we've made some suggestions to point out the kind of witnesses we want, and these are the witnesses who were directly precipient to the scheme as it was developed and implemented.
I have seconds left, but are you okay with Republicans then calling witnesses?
Yeah, I think both sides should be able to call witnesses. The White House should be able to call witnesses that it wants, and the House managers should be able to call witnesses that they want, subject to the usual rules about relevance.
We took it all as far as we could, Senator. Really appreciate you coming on the program. Please come back soon. Thank you.
Gladly.